Welcome everybody to the ECMO resource connection and discussion. Today we have some incredible guests that have joined us from different parts of the world and are going to be sharing their ECMO stories. I'm so honored to be here with these people in this space, and so I will go ahead and give it over to Rick, who is a previous ECMO patient. Rick, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm Rick Thagard. I'm from Oklahoma. I'm now 55. I think I was 50 when all this took place. And I was, just a backstory on it, I was a pretty active guy. I had a young son that I coached in football, and I had a daughter that was a cheerleader, and I was gone all the time, either coaching or taking the cheer, working full time. And suddenly I started where I just couldn't hardly breathe very well. I mean, I'd get up from my desk at the office and walk to the restroom and get out of breath. And I didn't think much of it other than I must be getting fat or something, getting out of shape. And then I was coaching my son's football game, and we did a pregame chant and jogged about 30 yards to the bench, and I about passed out. And I mean, everything just closed in and went black, and I realized something was wrong. So I went to my regular doctor, and he did some x-rays and things, and he came back in the room and he said, "You need to go see a pulmonologist." And I don't mean next week or the day after. He said, "I mean today. You need to start calling to get into a pulmonologist." And I didn't think much of that either. So I got pulmonologist, and they wanted to do tests and run all that, and which I did. I did let them take some tissue out of my lungs and look at it, and they came up with a diagnosis of IPF, idiopathic fibrosis, and I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And found out later that it was. I started looking into it and said that it was a 3 to 5 year life expectancy after diagnosis. And 2 years prior to that, I'd broken all my ribs on one side and had some x-rays from that experience. So I took those to my pulmonologist, and he looked at it and immediately said, "Yeah, you had it here." So then I got to thinking, man, I'm already 2 years into a death sentence. And, just kind of fast forward a little bit, almost 5 years to the day, I was on the operating table. But the process was long. My body was strong when this started. And as time went on, I got weaker and weaker. And the theory of my lung problem is rheumatoid arthritis attacked my lungs. And I never had any symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis until my lungs started getting really bad. And if I did something active and I got out of breath really bad, within 30 or 40 minutes, I would be crippled with the arthritis. And it got to the point where I was using a wheelchair all the time. My life existed from getting in my bed, walking to my shower, putting on clothes, sitting in a chair before I left, and then walking from my chair to my car, from my car to my desk at work, and then reverse the process on the way home. And I'd hidden this from my family. My kids knew that I was hurting, but the rest of my family didn't, Scott and my mom and dad and brother. And finally it got really bad, at this point where I couldn't walk. I mean, there was nothing I could do to get up, and I was trying to make it in the house from the truck, and I finally had my daughter video it so I could send it to my family to let them know that something was going on. And that's when Scott said, "Get to a doctor now." And we kept going. I went to a RA specialist for a while who worked with my clinic to keep the medications and stuff are kind of, some of them are similar and some are not, but they work together to make sure that everything was going okay. And Originally, I had gone to a local hospital that does transplants and talked to them about transplant, but they really were disinterested. They didn't act like they wanted to help me at all. And basically the guy walks in and says, well, you're obese, and unless you can lose 65 pounds, we're not even going to talk to you. I said, okay, that's good. So I left, and I didn't go back. Well, my local pulmonologist at one point says, there's nothing I can do for you. This is well beyond my control. I can send you down to another hospital, and they have some programs going on that they can get you into. And I said, that'd be fine. And that didn't work out. He decided that there was another one he wanted me to go to. And that's how I got involved with that hospital. And so I'd worked for about a year to lose weight, all this time, not really being able to exercise. So I'm trying to lose weight, and I think I'd lost like 30 pounds. And when I talked to the clinic down there, they said, well, if you lose 30 pounds, we'll give you 3 months to lose 30 pounds. And if you do that, then we'll know you're serious. And I think I lost 36. And that's when they said they do the testing to get me on a transplant list. And Scott and I went down and we scheduled all the tests to be done in 1 week. And there's a lot of them. I don't remember. It was like 30 something tests, if I'm not mistaken. And they did all of them that 1 week, and forgot to do one. And so went back the following week, and they were doing a bronchoscopy. And when I came out of that, I was in pain, and told the doctor I was in pain. And he sent us home. And whenever we got home that night, Scott decided he'd stay with me. And I woke up the next morning, and my head was swollen, my neck was swollen. And between Scott and my mom, somebody called an ambulance. And that's when I wind up in the hospital. And to me, I didn't feel like anything was wrong. And I laid in the emergency room where I was at. I watched a OU football game from start to finish. And in the last play of that game, they were pulling me out of that room. I said goodbye to everybody that was in there. And that's the last memory that I have until there's a couple of memories I had in the hospital, and I'm not sure if I was on ECMO or not on ECMO, but for me, everything else is gone from there. And so that's the extent of my knowledge. I've been told a lot of stories, but for my personal knowledge, that's all I know. I think Scotty could fill in for that stuff better than me.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that information, and just sharing your experience, what you remember, a little bit of your history, and what went on. And I remember personally taking care of you while you were on ECMO. And so it's so good to reconnect with you today, and just to see your face again, and to hear you talking, and you don't have a tube in your mouth, and you're not cannulated. And it's just such an encouragement to see that. So thank you for sharing, and we'll jump back to you in a little while. Scott, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and how you are related to this situation, and what your memories are, what happened.
I'm Scott, and I am one of Rick's brothers. It's funny, all my friends, the people that know me best, know that my memory is horrible. And, as Rick's retelling what led up to that event, a lot of that was already gone for me, but, I remember it now. And I do remember that night, whenever after the bronchoscopy, where he, like puffed up like a toad frog, and then we end up going to the hospital. And at that point, it was I'm sitting down and this guy's like, we're life flighting him into Dallas and we're doing it now. And, you know, it's going to cost 10 grand to get him there. And, you know, your first selfish thought is, I mean, where am I going to get 10 grand to fly him? And then you basically said, I don't care. I mean, put him on a plane. Let's go. Let's get him there. Best part of that story was 10 grand was just the retainer. It was like $250,000 to fly him there. But, you know, I had the clothes on my back and I jumped in an airplane with Rick and a nurse and a pilot. And we flew to Dallas and I practically was there 24/7 for the next 4 months. In his room, didn't even have a hotel room for a while. It was just, I basically lived in that room. I felt it was important that he have a patient advocate there to look out for his best interests. Of course, I had tremendous family help, and they did come and give me a break every so often, and they would stay for a spell. And I do remember for future people who watch this video, who deal with patients on a regular basis, that, you know, one of the most stressful parts of that early on process was, where am I going to stay? I feel like I need to be here in this room, but I also need a place to stay. And it was stressful just being in a city away from your house and, you know, no resources, no contacts. And then I remember this sweet little nurse that came up with a list and basically said, here you go. I know I can see your struggles and your pain, and here's a list of apartments nearby. So thank you so much for doing that. Then, you know, the kind of process started. We met with, I don't remember all the details. It's been 5 years, but I do remember that Dr. J was one of the sweetest people and one of the most compassionate people, and that's what let her stand out above the rest. As far as doctors go, is that you could see deep in her heart the care, the concern, the love for her patient, not just a job, but genuinely, truly wanted to see the best for people. And, you know, some doctors and nurses, you can see it's, you know, it's all business and just another patient and just another paycheck. But that wasn't the case with Dr. J and others. But being there 24/7, there was the family and I, we had a list of people that we called the A team and the B team. And then there was the others that were just there collecting a paycheck. And I think for people who may watch this video and deal with patients, that's a responsibility that you should take very seriously, that they are human beings and they are family members, and this is their loved one, and it's not just a paycheck, and it, you know, it's people's lives that you're dealing with. And patients and family members can see that and they can feel that. And so to you people out there that watch this, and you were part of that A team or B team, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for what you did. It was explained to us early in the process about ECMO, which as soon as I heard the word ECMO, I had no clue whatsoever what it was. And I've got a couple of family members who are nurses. And so I got on the phone and talked to them about ECMO. And of course, at that point, 5 years ago, and everybody said, well, ECMO is stuff they use for infants and babies and stuff like that. But, you know, they'd never really heard of it being for 50-year-old adults. And so we get there and we're talking to the medical professionals, and Mary Ann, I believe was her name, a nurse practitioner. She's very matter of fact. And I remember the conversation with her was basically, you got 30 days on ECMO, and this is not a lifesaver. This is nothing more than something that's going to buy us some time, because time is what we need. We need time to find lungs, and without ECMO, there's not going to be any more time. So, I mean, I appreciated the harshness of it, but I also, realized that, this is a device that we need, and we're going to have to depend on it. And, it's a scary thought. All these tubes coming in and taking your blood out and cleaning it up and pumping it back in and all that, and bypassing your lungs. But, as a family member sitting there watching it, I mean, I still have the vivid memories of trying to sleep in a room with, it seems like there's 50 green lights on the tree, the IV pole that you see, and 50s, I'm sure an exaggeration, but it was lit up like a Christmas tree, and there's always a constant bell going off. And so, over the next month, staying in that room 24/7, I began to be able to see that little Christmas tree and read what alarm was going off and what one meant and what one didn't. And so that was interesting to deal with that. I remember having several conversations with Dr. J and Dr. Kaza, how dire situations were, and brief discussions with, are we going to pull him off of ECMO? Or are we going to, we're going to pull the plug? Are we going to keep going? And those were hard conversations, but, necessary. And for nurses who are out there, I'd like to say that I remember one conversation in particular where Dr. J and Dr. Kaza were sitting there discussing what we would do. And Melissa, who was part of the A team, didn't hold back. And, you think that, us commoners out there in the world think of, the doctor is the one who knows everything, and the doctor's got the say about this and that. And the nurses basically do kind of what the doctors tell them to do. Well, that wasn't the case this day. And, so I would encourage nurses to, if you know your stuff and a doctor is not right, then speak up, because you've got a patient's life who's dependent on it. And I remember Melissa saying, no, we can't do that, because if we do A, then XYZ will happen. And so you saw the doctors look at each other and say, you know what, she's exactly right. And so they didn't do A, and so they did B instead. And I was so thankful that you've got nurses out there who have the knowledge and aren't afraid to stand up to someone who people say are above them. Sorry about that.
That's the doctor.
Yeah. But yeah, I was very appreciative of that happening. So, if you know your stuff and you're confident in yourself, then by all means, I think you should step up. Now, doctors may have a different opinion, I don't know, but that's just something that you guys have to work out amongst yourselves, I guess. But the other thing is, just over time, I mean, you see who cares about patients, and you see about you know who is collecting a paycheck. And when you spend 24/7 in a room with people for well over a month that we were in there on ECMO, you see people and you kind of figure out who they are and what they're about. And so I would encourage anybody to be like the Dr. J's of the world and the Melissas and the Jennas and the Nicoles and the nighttime Jenna, I forget her name, Molly was one. But you know, the people who really truly deep down care and go a step above and beyond and care for the patients and show a little more than someone just collecting a paycheck, because it matters and it truly affects family members and patients' lives. I mean, Rick doesn't remember any of all of this, but I sure do. And my brother does, and my parents do. So, the other thing that I grew to appreciate was that I know that there's what I would consider the dirty side of the business, of the transplant business, is that everybody gets together and they have these meetings and they decide who gets a second chance at life and who doesn't. And there's this list, and it's a discussion that happens on every Tuesday or whatever day it was. And everybody gets together at the big round table and they throw all the chips out on the table and they have a discussion. I mean, you think about that as a dirty part of the business, but it's an essential part of the business. And the best explanation they gave to me was, you know, you're standing in a swimming pool and there's 5 kids that fall in. Who do you rescue first? And it's like, well, the one who's the weakest, the one who's struggling the most. So it's harsh reality, but I grew to appreciate that. And I think Rick got to the point to where he was struggling the most and he got there quickly. But one of the things that I grew to appreciate the most out of that situation was that they sat me down and they explained to me about dry runs. This is transplant, not necessarily ECMO, but they explained to me about dry runs and that they happen. And, you know, when you get that call, don't get overly excited. And, you know, as the story unfolded, we got a phone call late one night and we had a set of lungs. And so I called all of the family members back home and let them know. And, you know, of course, everyone's all excited, but I also, because of those conversations, said, look, don't get too excited. You know, I mean, be happy, be thankful, but also don't get too far out there to where you're just going to be completely crushed if, you know, a dry run happens. And sure enough, you know, we had a dry run, and without that conversation, I think that would have crushed some family members pretty hard. And so I think that's important that you remember family members and explain those things. The other thing about family members is, you know, try to speak to us as people who haven't gone to medical school and realized all of the medical terminology. I think that's important because you start talking all of this medicalese and, you know, it just kind of goes over most of our heads. But long and short of it, I mean, everybody did do a good job, and it's partly the patient and family members' responsibility to ask questions, which I felt like I did quite a bit. We were talking earlier, and I do remember that ECMO was just, you know, it's just that kind of that bridge that was going to buy us time, and so thankful that ECMO was created and used on 50-year-old adults. And it basically saved Rick's life and gave him the time that he needed. I remember another process that we talked about at some point, because it was getting so bleak, because, you know, Mary Ann, I believe her name was, told us that we had 30 days. Well, we got to 30 days and we still didn't have lungs and we didn't have transplant. And so we begged and pleaded and to get more time. And so we did get graced with a little bit more time. But during that time, we also talked with a couple other doctors about a process called ex vivo, which I guess is to like rehabilitate some lungs and keep them, to buy them some time, I guess, to make them better. And then at some point we had to make the decision about high risk lungs, which we eventually did say that, yes, we're willing to take high risk because, you know, it's now or never. We need lungs and we got to have them now. So we accepted high risk lungs, and I remember that his lungs had just deteriorated so much that the size was just everything was shriveled up. And so not only did we take high risk lungs, but we reduced the size. He was 5'8", and we said, we'll take lungs for someone who's 5'4" or something like that, because of just the space involved. And sure enough, I don't remember, a few days after doing that, a set of lungs came in, and I don't know, it was 8 or 10 hours, or I don't remember how long it was, but we got that call, and they did the transplant, and it wasn't over at that point by any stretch, but he woke up the next day breathing on his own, which very thankful for that. And then we spent several months in rehab, just trying to learn how to do the simple things in life again. And so that was all kinds of fun.
Unfortunately, I learned how to eat.
Fortunately, you need your nutrition for sure.
There is a communication problem there with the nutritionist that, you know, they said, hey, you know, he went to the hospital, if you remember Rick talking, that he needed to lose weight. And I don't remember how heavy he was, but I'm guessing 250 anyway.
266.
266. He got down to just over 200, I believe, before all this happened. And then in the hospital, he got down to 135 pounds, because I know that every 4:30, every stinking morning, they come in and put the lights on and weigh the patient. And but, you know, got down to 135 pounds. So a nutritionist gets involved after the transplant and says, you got to eat 2,500 calories every single day. And you guys, when we tell you to do something, you do it. So Rick was following the letter of the law, and he's, you know, forcing himself to eat 2,500 calories a day. And next thing you know, he's gained a ton of weight. And they're like, dude, you're fat. You need to quit eating. Well, I'm doing exactly what you told me to do. So we did have a little bit of a communication problem there. But overall, I'm extremely happy and thankful for ECMO and transplant teams and surgeons. Dr. Waite is a rock star in my book, and thankful for, you know, all the therapists, respiratory therapist and the physical therapist, and everybody involved. It's quite an ordeal. Two things I remember vividly was the day when things didn't go well, and Nicole and Dr. J can explain it better than I can, but everything crashed, and you watch television and there's like some code blue or something, and everybody runs from everywhere. And it wasn't a code blue, but it was something else. And I mean, just that room went from 2 nurses to 15 people in there instantly. and they were working feverishly, and you saw the game face come on from these people that, you know, you could tell it was a different day and a different situation, and the game face was impressive to watch the team come together, which was really cool. Thankfully, it all worked out, and they were able to stabilize and get whatever needed to be done. But I'll never forget that day. And then there's
So
another day.
I'm just gonna pop in here and see, we have another guest on, and she's just an amazing physician. I've had the honor of working with her previously, and she's just going to share a little bit about who she is and what she does, what she's passionate about, what she remembers from this experience, and diving into what Scott is talking about with the game face and the change and what happened. So Jessica, are you there?
I am. Hi, I am Jessica Mullins. I'm the infamous Dr. J that Scott keeps referring to. And I am a transplant pulmonologist and a ECMO specialist. And I had the pleasure of taking care of Rick and being the point person for Scott's advocacy. He doesn't take enough credit for his advocate role. But his kind of backstory as far as medically, he had pulmonary fibrosis, he got his transplant evaluation. He was very close to being ready for listing. And then underwent bronchoscopy, as you mentioned, developed pneumomediastinum with air tracking into his face. That's when he says he blew up like a puffer fish, that was air. And essentially exacerbated his fibrosis, and flew to us with severe hypoxic respiratory failure. I don't remember how long from the time he showed up to when he got cannulated, but it was probably a day or two. Scott may actually know better than me. And there was discussion about making sure that we didn't ECMO somebody who didn't have a plan. So we had to have that fancy transplant meeting and ensure that he was a transplant candidate. We did talk extensively about how if you're on ECMO too long and you become too deconditioned, then transplant's maybe not the best option. I don't remember if it was 30 days or 14 days or how many days. Luckily, going into the process, Rick was still pretty strong relative. And so when he came to us muscle-wise, he had a little bit of reserve. So that was good. He had secondary pulmonary hypertension, not severe, but enough that we knew that it may be potentially a problem. And chose to do a right IJ dual lumen catheter that returned into the pulmonary artery, hoping that would buy us enough time on ECMO that we could get him some new lungs. I saw Rick every day. He was actually awake and not intubated, but he doesn't remember any of it. He was, had some sedatives on board. I spent lots of quality time with Scott because Scott potentially was the most intimidating family member I have ever met. But he was really on top of his game. He didn't dodge any questions. He didn't mince any words, and he point blank wanted to know like the facts every single day, which I pride myself on having a pretty good poker face, because I don't feel like patients and families need to worry about what I need to worry about as much as I need to worry about it. But we had pretty pointed discussions about exactly what was happening. And honestly, he was doing fairly well on ECMO. And while we were kind of waiting for these lungs to show up, luckily he is not exaggerating at all when he says that we had the A team. I am a huge fan of of the nurses and respiratory therapists, and the other physicians that were on the team when Rick was in the hospital. They are like the epitome of proactive. It's easy to be reactive on ECMO. You follow a protocol, a number changes, you turn a dial in a different direction. That part is not difficult. It is more difficult to recognize subtle changes and be like, hey, something's going on. Which is what Melissa did when he said that, you know, she thought that things were going a different direction and we needed to not do what we thought we were going to do. But yeah, he was an amazing advocate. Rick did his part later when he was awake for rehabbing. But he got to sleep through the hard part, I guess. And then our team were people that I trusted to be proactive and to like tell me if they thought something was wrong, and probably get more credit than I do, because as far as noticing when things were maybe not going that great, that day that things got stressful was definitely picked up first by nursing, and even the plan was executed partially by the nursing staff. We converted Rick to VA ECMO after noticing that he was developing signs of heart failure and decreased organ perfusion. And in true Thagard fashion, it was very abrupt and dramatic. The conversion had to happen very quickly, and thus the A game came out. And my poker face was horrible because Scott could tell right away that things were not looking great at the moment. So after that, I feel like the transplant happened like the next day, but I think that's a skewed memory. After the conversion to VA, we were a little bit more smooth sailing, and we still needed some lungs urgently. And luckily those came, and all went well after that for me. All I had to do was boss him around and tell him to get out of bed and walk.
So can you go ahead and share, Jessica, just a little bit, what would be just a couple of pointers and words of wisdom that you would share with physicians who are taking care of ECMO patients, as well as nurses and respiratory therapists? What have you seen in your practice that you feel needs to be spoken to and you would like to just share with everybody?
I mean, I spend a lot of time in medical education with interns and residents and fellows. And what we talk about a lot is recognizing when something isn't right. Like something seems off, or something doesn't make sense. If you ignore that, then by the time you realize that it's a big deal, it's probably too big of a deal. From my standpoint, that's probably the biggest thing. And it doesn't hurt to ask. So if you're the nurse or the respiratory therapist or the ECMO specialist that's bedside, and you feel like, you know, his legs are colder than they should be, which is exactly what it was. Why are his legs so cold? I was like, that's not good. And that's all it took to start this whole cascade of like, this is not going well. But the other thing from a physician standpoint is I have heard lots of families kind of criticize that there's a very fine line between being realistic and being optimistic, which is super difficult to walk. You don't want to promise them that you're going to make it to transplant, or that you can keep somebody on ECMO for 6 weeks until they can get a transplant, because that medically is probably not the best decision. But you also don't want to tell them that they, that things aren't going to happen. It's not going to happen. And that, I think, is a difficult discussion every single patient. So there's no magic way to figure out how to be on the right side of that line. But I'm sure Scott could give me some more pointers. I think he did my job most of that time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your input and just speaking to that situation, and you're coming from your experience. It's awesome. So I'll let Scott go ahead and pick up where he was. I think he had one more point to share, and then we will close this session.
No, I don't remember what that point was, but I do know what Dr. J was talking about there, and that conversation is a difficult conversation, but it's very important that that people do realize that you're talking to human beings, and we all have loved ones who are hurting, and you can't promise us too much, but you also can't avoid the facts, and you just have to massage the situation and lay it out there like it, just facts what they are, and let the chips fall where they may.
Very true. Very true. Rick, can you tell us, because we all are interested, and I get this question a lot from family members, do you remember any of your time while you were cannulated on ECMO?
I do not. The only thing I remember the stories that I've been told. So as far as, I can tell you the stories if you want to hear those, but I like exercise was a big deal from what I understand, that they would have somebody get me into a chair. I believe it's during this time that they would take me out of the bed and get me into a chair so that I'm moving a little bit, would work on moving my legs. Apparently I had trouble with bowel retention, because there was some machine that would pick me up, and Scott told me about that, and I felt horrible for the nurses, but you guys put up with a lot, I guess. And but as far as it goes, I really don't have any true memories of that. I know that one of the memories I have, and this could or could not be during this time, is I was trying to communicate to Scott some of my financial stuff for my kids, and I could not talk, and I was on medication, and I was trying to write for him, and I'd start writing, and then it would just drift off, and I'd come up, and my, the writing would be all crooked, and they couldn't ever understand what I was trying to tell them, so I was frustrated. But so it's important to people to financially to get that stuff done early. I know as a family we tried to, but apparently I wasn't very concise in the things that I put down as my wishes. But that's one of the memories that I have. And the only other memory I think I have is after transplant. That was I just remember waking my first real memory after transplant. I believe they were moving me from one floor to the other, and I had a BiPAP on, and I wake up just like I just kind of looked around, and we're going down this hallway, and I looked at Scott and said, "What happened?" And he just started laughing. So we're 30 something days into it, and that's my first real memory that I can recall. But so the ECMO stuff, and while I've got this little bit of time, just if you're an ECMO nurse or an ICU nurse or any of the people that are dealing with this, just realize that you guys make a huge impact in our lives. And I know that I couldn't recognize any of you on the street because everybody wore masks. And but there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about the nurses and the doctors and the people that helped save my life. And I believe that God uses you guys in a great way. And I've seen things, I've got to do things. I mean, I've got a granddaughter now. My daughter graduated high school. I got to see that. My daughter got married. I got to see that. My youngest son's driving a car now. I mean, there's a lot of things that I would have missed out on. I got to speak at my father's funeral, which is tough to do, but I was there to do it. And it's because of people like you and Dr. J and the others that just worked so diligently to save lives. So that's one of the things I wanted to get across in this.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. That's all I got.
Interestingly for people, Rick was actually fairly awake that period of time that he doesn't remember anything. When he says we got him to a chair, he actually got himself mostly to the chair. He he assisted and he sat and he talked. And so it was interesting conversations. And I'm always amazed at what kind of conversations I have with people on ECMO that they never remember, because if you didn't have the luxury of talking to them later, you wouldn't know that they weren't fully awake and making complete sense and understanding everything. So
I'm sorry if I hit on you.
you didn't say anything bad. After that ill-fated day where all things went kind of crazy, then you were asleep. But before that, you were awake on ECMO.
Awesome. Scott, do you have any last words or anything to add?
No, Dr. J reminded me of, there was a couple of nighttime nurses that came in, and there was a guy from Arkansas, and I remember that he told me my job is just to keep him snowed. And so he'd come in and give him all these drugs and just make sure that he wasn't aware of anything and just slept. And so that was his job, just to come in and keep him snowed. So
Yeah.
it was quite a ride, quite a journey. Thank you to all you medical professionals out there that have chosen this path of ECMO and transplants. And thanks so much for what you do. And you've given us at least 5 years with my brother Rick, and many more to come, I hope.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being available, for sharing from your heart, for walking the journey 4 or 5 years ago. And I know it hasn't been easy. It's been a struggle, and you guys have come through fighting strongly, and it's so good to see you. And thank you, Jessica, for joining in today. Good to see you again. And we will talk to you guys later. Thank you to all the ECMO specialists from around the world who are listening now and watching. And I hope that this has encouraged you, inspired you, and hope that your year is fantastic and you continue growing and learning as clinicians and achieving more.
Thank you.
Thanks. Goodbye, Dr. J.
Thanks.